Yes. Ashish, start.
Regards to all my seniors and Dr. R.K. Agarwal sir, Dr. Harinder sir, we'll start this PG session with Dr. Rahul Gutte, who will give his first presentation. And welcome, Dr. Rahul Gutte, over to you.
Should I share my screen now?
Yes.
Shall I share my screen?
Yes.
शेयर करने के लिए स्क्रीन बोल उस
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
Yes.
My screen is visible now?
Yeah.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Rahul Manikrao Gutte. I'm a second year DM cardiology resident, currently working at IGMS Patna. And today I will be presenting one of the interesting case, which is actually unusual to come across as a routine practice in cardiology. That is the case of uterine artery AV malformation, and which was treated with transcatheter embolization at our institute. So to start with, this was the patient. She was 32-year-old multiparous woman who was presented in a gynecological department with a complaint of recurrent abnormal uterine bleeding for 6 months. On inquiry, she gives a history of spontaneous abortion 6 months back, following which she had underwent dilatation and evacuation twice at some PHC. Her previous menstrual cycle were normal. Clinical examination, it was paler only, and pelvic examination was normal. She was evaluated at gynecology department only with the UPT negative to rule out the regular causes or the common causes of uterine bleeding in that young age, with hemoglobin was 6.3 and beta HCG was negative. She was evaluated for the suspected case of AV malformation, as all the routine causes for this young generation uterine bleeding was ruled out, and evaluated with color Doppler sonography, which shows there is an arteriovenous malformation in the form of a hypervascular lesion with a turbulent flow was diagnosed, which was then confirmed with the MRI pelvis. Then patient was referred to the cardiology, and the collaborative decision regarding the management is taken in between cardiology and gynecology. Blood transfusion was done in view of anemia with a significant low HB of 6.3, and uterine artery embolization bilaterally was planned through the femoral route with using a catheter, 4-French diagnostic catheter with the embolization material nitinol coil through the microcatheter. Till 6 months she was followed, and patient had a normal menses after 2 months. So before going into the presentation or the CD presentation of that particular case, I will have a quick review of the uterine artery anatomy. This is actually animated picture which suggests you there is abdominal aorta which end up at L4 level by giving rise to the 2 common iliac artery branches, and this common iliac further goes downward and laterally, then gives rise to the 2 branches at sacroiliac joint with the form of internal iliac and external iliac. The artery of interest is the internal iliac for today's case, and it gives rise to the branches of anterior and posterior. This anterior branch is associated with uterine artery, which is the important one. Then second one, these are having different variations of uterine artery, which can be seen and which need to be studied before going for embolization. So to start with this particular case, we have gone through the right femoral approach with a diagnostic 4-French catheter. We have taken a pelvic angiogram, which clearly shows there is a bilateral common iliac artery, and this common iliac artery is then further focused over the AV malformation. Here we can clearly see that there is a central hypertrophied vascular mass can be seen, which is filling from bilateral feeding arteries, and this is by the uterine artery bilaterally. So after confirming the diagnosis, this is the pictorial presentation. Here we can clearly see this is the uterine artery which is feeding this AV malformation over here. So we have targeted the left-sided feeding artery, that is uterine artery. We have engaged the internal iliac artery on the left side from the right femoral root, and we suggest you there is a feeding artery which feeds this AV malformation, can be seen on left side. So we proceed with the wire. We are particularly engaging the artery of interest and this feeder on the left side. After that, we introduce a coil with a microcatheter system, and we deploy this with the help of this microcatheter system. After deploying it in the proximal uterine artery, we have taken one flush angiogram to see whether it is appropriately placed or not, and it suggests you there is a significant reduction of this flow in left side of this feeder in AV malformation. So after clearing that, we have on second day, after stabilization with blood transfusion, we engage the artery on the right side from the left femoral approach of the and we take a selective angiogram on the right side by engaging the internal iliac artery on the right side, which is suggestive of clearly there is a large uterine artery having a tortuous course which feeds this AV malformation. So after taking this particular picture of AV malformation and confirming on the right side, we then again particularly engage the artery of interest, that is the uterine artery, which is feeding particularly this AV malformation. And after that, we took a wire to engage this catheter in that particular artery, that is uterine artery on the right side, which is feeding a large volume of a blood to this AV malformation. After engaging that, we plan to deploy a coil with microcatheter system in proximal uterine artery, and we successfully end up by deploying this artery with a microcatheter system in this artery. After that, we took a flush angiogram to confirming whether we have succeeded or not. It suggests you of yes, there is a significantly decrease in flow to the AV malformation on that side, but some amount of flow is still persist. This taken after 5 minutes of deploying a coil. So we took a decision to deploy a second coil in a proximal as compared to that previous coil, and we end up with doing a successful embolization on the right side, as this flush angiogram clearly shows there is a decreased blood flow and there is a no AV flow to the AV malformation from the right side also. So she was then discharged after 24 hours of observation without any acute complication and bleeding. She was followed up 6 months with a monthly for 3 months, and at the 6 month with clinical examination, local examination, and color Doppler to rule out any failure or long-term complications. But she had a normal menses. We suggest you there is no any complication regarding the affecting the ovulation, and also there is a normal EOG without any complaint of further bleeding. These are the different publication studies and this case series which are published all over the world, which suggest you that uterine artery embolization is one of the treatment of choice in case of AV malformation, even though the diagnostic modality is as rare to diagnose this case. So I would like to conclude this case as a experience of AV malformation in uterus is actually diagnosis of exclusion. Early suspicion is the key. Earlier, hysterectomy was the only option, and recently available of intervention techniques in many hospitals have made the outlook more positive toward the conserving uterus, so the young women don't feel deprived of their youth precautiously. After experiencing with this particular case, we can conclude that uterine artery embolization is an excellent procedure with having a safe and effective procedure with low complications and preserving the fertility. So I would like to thank my HOD, Dr. BP Singh sir, Department of Cardiology, IGMS Patna, and Dr. Neero Kumar sir for guiding me to this case and giving me an opportunity to present such a case on a big platform. I would like to thank also to the CardioCon 2021 for giving me an opportunity to present this case on this big platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul. You presented well. What are the other way other than the coil which we can use?
So other than the coil, it depends on the experience. It depends on the expert which is actually going for the procedure. We can go for the coil as we have discussed this case. Actually, in other form, we can also go from the PVA materials, and also we can go from the gel forms or some particular liquid material which are the polymers like cyanoacrylate or onyx, which is actually easy to deploy but very early to get polymerized. So we prefer the coiling over this all other methods.
I want to one question.
Dr. Bharti.
In which group it should not be done? Uterine artery embolization.
Sir, it is seen that in uterine artery embolization, in young group before the 40 year of age, whenever we want to preserve the fertility of the patient or preserve the prematurely not wanted to remove the uterus, in such cases it is preferred. And it has been seen that more than 45 year of age, it ultimately affecting ovulation or ovulation also. So in that case, in older age after menopause, we can go for hysterectomy. But in a younger age group, it is a preferable method.
In which group which group of uterine tumor should be done?
Uterine?
Tumors. Which are the uterine tumor is indicated?
In uterine tumor, it is particularly in fibroid, which is a benign tumor. It is indicated in younger age group in such a case also. It is a particular modality is followed in foreign countries It is not that much practice in India, but it is having a very good result up to the moderate side, less than 7 centimeter of fibroid also.
Thank you. Thank you. Very nice.
Thank you, Rahul. Very nice. Very nice. Right, fellow, next.
I would like to invite Dr. Neeraj Kumar to give his second presentation. That is a second PG presentation. Dr. Neeraj Kumar.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am here to present a challenging case of left main fascia in an unstable patient. This is a 55-year-old patient admitted with complaint of angina on class effort class 2 and 2 or 3 with recurrent rest angina. Angiography done outside shows left main osteoproximal 95% lesion. Patient was offered CABG, but he is not yet willing to for PCI. So taken for left main PCI with provisional short stenting. His left every function was normal and all biochemical parameter was normal. Right femoral loop was taken because due to previous angiography, right radial pulse was feeble. Guiding catheter taken JL 3.0 and guiding wire Cougar XT. And this left coronary was hooked with JL 3.0 catheters. There was a significant around 95% osteoproximal left main disease. This is confirmed in other views also. Then the lesion was crossed with Cougar XT wire. During wiring, patient developed severe chest pain. And there was significant STT changes and QRS widening. There was no flow in coronary artery after wiring. So, so a short balloon was taken, 2 into 10 balloon was placed across the lesion and was inflated at 10 atm, after which the flow returned, chest pain subsided, and flowing chest pain subsided and STT changes also disappeared. And again, Cougar wire was crossed across the lesions, and multiple view taken to confirm the position of the wire. Then a stent of Giants Expedition 3.5 into 23 mm was placed across the lesions. Its position was confirmed in different views. It was placed across left main to LAD. And after confirming its position, it was deployed at an optimal pressure of 8 atm. Then post dilatation of stent was done with a short balloon of 4 into 10 atm up to 22 atm. Dilatation was done. Its position was stent boost was taken to check the positions of stenting. After there was a provisional plan of LCX stenting, but there is TV3 flowing LCX which was confirmed in different view. So LCX stenting was not attempted. So position of a stent was checked in different view. Then there IVOS was out of order and that day, so OCT run was done to check the proper position of LAD stent. OCT catheter is being pulled back from LAD to left main, showing LAD. This is OCT catheters being, this is OCT catheter is being pulled back from left LAD to left main. It shows left branches of LAD. As OCT is not good for left main disease due to its poor penetration of 2 to 3 mm, and Also, contrast for flush is needed to flush out blood. And as left man, usual left man diameter is 3.4 to 4.5, more than 3.5. So it is not good for left man. Here we see the stent of struts of stent is good, better opposed to LED, but we are not able to visualize the left man. But optimal area of around 10 millimeter was achieved in LED. So our cases was unstable patient with recurrent rest angina with ostial left main disease. IVUS was out of order, so we decided to take help of OCT, but final result was satisfactory. So previous guidelines showed around ACC/HR 2011 or ESC 2015 2A was the guideline for left main intervention, but in current guidelines in 2018 ESC, left main CAD disease with low syntax score 0 to 12 is 1A class, and the left main disease with intermediate syntax score 23 to 32 is also 1, but left main disease with high syntax more than 33 is class 3 indication. So as per current evidence and from clinical trials and off-label experience, stenting with a specialized technique, adjunctive physiological and imaging supports had mortality and has a similar mortality and morbidity rate when compared to CABG, especially in patients with low and intermediate lesion complexity.
So nice presentation, Dr. Neeraj. I would like to have any comments from
Dr.
Baby
Bharti
Bharti
here.
sir or BP Singh sir.
Yes,
Sir,
sir. Abhinav Bhagat is here. Bharti.
Abhinav.
This is a initially it was thought the left main intervention should be now done by cardiologists, but with data is coming and the syntax score is very important, and the experience of the operator is very important when are doing the left main. And definitely now it is under control of cardiologists. Many of the cardiologists are doing left main with imaging other. And the most important thing in left main, how can you fall, how the position of a stent, and especially for ostial left main and tight ostial left main, when very thicker of flow, then it is a very, all the things should be rapidly done, not wait for the longer inflation, and the wide should be, the balloon should be on wide, and the rapid inflation deflation should be done. And the flaring of the ostium is very important when I'm doing the ostial left main. It is very important because the restenosis they become lesser. Very nice case presentation by the Dr. Neeraj, very good case, and he used the imaging. He did a very important aspect of left main stenting. Thank you, Neeraj, for nice case presentation.
Very good, Neeraj.
Very nice.
Yes, sir.
Abhinav, do you want to say anything?
No,
Good presentation, Neeraj. Good.
Sir, thank you, sir.
very nice.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Neeraj. Now we'd like to invite Dr. Prashant Kashyap from Pune to give his presentation. Over to you, Dr. Prashant.
Is it visible now?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'll be presenting a paper on a rare case of Takayasu arthritis type 1. Which
Again, very sorry. You have to press the play button. Play. Yeah. Yeah, now it's visible. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'll be presenting a paper on a rare case of Takayasu arthritis type 1, which is not so common in our country, but it is more common in Japan and other Southeast Asian countries. Takayasu arthritis is basically a chronic non-specific inflammatory disease involving the aorta and its main branches at different levels, including the brachiocephalic artery, carotid, subclavian, vertebral, renal arteries, carotid, pulmonary arteries. Histologically, it presents as a panarteritis with intimal proliferation and fibrosis, thickening of the medial layer, cellular infiltration, and collagenous fibrosis in multiple layers, thickened adventitia with cellular infiltration around vasa vasorum. Now, an abstract about my case. The current case reports on a middle-aged woman, 33-year-old female, who presented with complaints of syncope, visual disturbance, and upper limb claudication since 1 year. And before that, she was absolutely fine. She had no complaints. In this case, it is rare because generally patients have two phases. Either they have pre-pulseless phase or a pulseless phase. But this patient did not have any complaints of the pre-pulseless phase, which is fever, malaise, any lethargy or myalgia. The delayed diagnosis and lack of specific treatment could explain the extent and the clinical severity of the disease at the time of admission. In this case, angiography showed total occlusion of the innominate or the brachiocephalic artery, the left subclavian artery, the left common carotid, and the left internal carotid artery was diffusely diseased, and the external carotid artery was totally occluded. The coronaries, the aortic arch per se, the descending aorta, abdominal aorta, the renal arteries were normal. The early diagnosis and treatment is warranted in such cases, and the outcomes appear to be favorable when the disease is in the quiescent stage. Now, my case history was a 33-year-old female. She came to our hospital with chief complaints of syncope since 1 year, visual disturbance since 1 year, upper limb claudication since 1 year. Patient had 3 to 4 episodes of syncope in last 1 year, lasting for around 30 seconds with spontaneous recovery, which was not associated with any weakness of limb, any aura preceding the syncope, any seizure or any tongue bite. Patient complained of reduced vision during exertion only, which used to relieve on rest. Patient also complained of tingling and numbness of both upper limbs along with pain, more which she experienced during working in day-to-day activities and relieved on warming hands. She also gave a history of transient ischemic attacks 7 months back, but there was no history of any fever, malaise, arthralgia, weight loss, any Raynaud's phenomena in the recent past. And there was no history of any diabetes, hypertension, or tuberculosis. On examination, she was conscious and well-oriented, normal build, pallor was present. She had malar rash was present. There was a remarkable blood pressure discrepancy between the right and the left arms. The blood pressure was undetectable in the left arm, but in the right arm, it was 146 by 94 mmHg in supine position. Both the left and the right radial and brachial pulses were impalpable, but the lower limb pulses were normal. She had a heart rate of 100 beats per minute and a temperature of 37.9 degrees Celsius. Cardiovascular and respiratory examination was absolutely normal. On investigation being done, ECG was normal. There were no significant changes. 2D echo also had no significant findings. The positive laboratory finding was she had an elevated ESR of 82 and CRP of 6.51 milligram per deciliter. The blood cultures for ruling out any infective etiology or any investigation for VDRL test or tuberculosis test were negative. The autoimmune serological findings were also negative. We did the bilateral upper limb Doppler, which showed echogenic thrombus in the brachiocephalic trunk, the proximal right and left subclavian artery, proximal right and left common carotid artery, and there was a monophasic low velocity waveform noted in the subclavian, axillary, brachial, radial, the common carotid, internal and external carotid, as well as vertebral artery. Then we went ahead with MRI brain angiography, which showed severe narrowing of the brachiocephalic artery and the common carotid artery, severe luminal narrowing of the entire left common carotid artery, and there was a luminal narrowing of the left internal carotid artery along its entire length, even in the intracranial course. There was severe luminal narrowing of the proximal portion of the left vertebral artery also, as well as luminal narrowing of the subclavian artery, left subclavian artery. The coronary angiography was absolutely normal. Then the arch aortography, all the 3 branches were occluded, and the arch itself, the arch per se, the arch of aorta was normal. The descending aorta, the abdominal aorta, the renal arteries were all normal. The iliac artery was normal. The aortic pressure, which was taken by the catheter, was 186 by 100 mmHg, and the femoral artery pressure was 168 by 100 mmHg. This is just an angiographic image. This one is showing that there is totally occluded the brachiocephalic artery. In this, we can see there is totally occluded left subclavian artery. In this image, we can see the left common carotid and the internal carotid artery is diffusely diseased, as well as the external carotid artery is totally occluded. And in this, we can see that even in the intracranial course, the internal carotid artery is diffusely diseased. This is the descending, the thoracic aorta and the abdominal aorta, which was normal. The arch of aorta itself per se was normal. The coronary angiography is showing the left system, the LAD, the LCX, it was normal. The right coronary artery was also normal. Both the renal arteries, right and left renal arteries, were also normal. This is the we got a 3D reconstruction of MR angio, which was slightly different from the angiography which we performed. The left, we can see there was absolutely cut off in the left subclavian. The left common cavity was diffusely diseased. In the right, there was cut off in the brachiocephalic artery, but still there was dye enhancement was there. The treatment, then we started the patient on oral methylprednisolone 60 mg per kg and methotrexate 15 mg once a week. The inflammatory parameters normalized within 3 weeks, and she was discharged from hospital. The discussion is that Takayasu arthritis most commonly it affects the women of childbearing age. It is a systemic and inflammatory large vessel vasculitis disease involving inflammation in the walls of the large arteries in the body. The aorta and its main branches. Disease is resulting from an attack by the body's own immune system, causing inflammation in the wall of artery. It is a very rare but more commonly seen in Japan and Southeast Asian countries. In 1990, it was included in the list, and to date, around only 5,000 cases have been reported. The two most important goals of the treatment have been controlling the inflammatory process and controlling the hypertension. Corticosteroids have been the main, most important therapeutic agents. The other agents which can be used are the cytotoxic agents like methotrexate, cyclophosphamide, and azathioprine have also been tried. For relapse, both the drugs can be combined and used. Hypertension should be treated as per normal antihypertensive agents, and antiplatelet agents have also been useful in preventing stroke. The other treatment options are the steroid, which we discussed, the biological agents like rituximab, tocilizumab, infliximab, abatacept, and ustekinumab are used, which are specifically guided for interleukin 6, interleukin 12, and the T-cell mediated pathway. So the inflammation is stopped. The immunosuppressive drugs like methotrexate, azathioprine, mycophenolate, mofetil, and cyclophosphamide can be used. The surgical options like stenting of the involved artery are done once the acute inflammatory stage is passed. This is just the Ishikawa diagnostic criteria of the type of the Takayasu artery. Type 1 involves only the branch of the aortic arch, which is in our case, which is rare in our countries. Type 2A, all the 3 branches and the aortic arch is involved, but the descending and the other parts of aorta are not involved. Type 2B, the descending thoracic aorta with or without involvement of the ascending aorta. Type 3, there is concomitant involvement of the descending thoracic aorta and abdominal aorta and renal arteries, but the arch, it is not involved. Type 4 involves the abdominal aorta and renal arteries only. Type 5 is generalized involvement. Now, I would like to conclude by saying that Takayasu arthritis, it should always be considered and kept in mind when a middle-aged woman presents to us with some red flag signs like unexplained raised ESR or CRP, carotidynia, hypertension, diminished pulses, any discrepancy in the BP in both arms, which is more than 10 mmHg, limb claudication, any arterial bruit, or any unexplained angina. Thank you for all the faculty members and the Cardicon team for giving me a platform.
Thank you, Dr. Prashant Kashyap, for your excellent presentation. Any comments, B.B. Bharti, sir?
Actually, the one thing, patient was very symptomatic, and there's the ischemia of the artery of brain. So there is some, after the subsiding of the inflammatory process, this type of patients should be intervened. Otherwise, patient will be recurrent symptomatic. Yes. And there is some still phenomena occurs. So these are the patient, ideal patient in which the patient very symptomatic, no other option than revascularization by the plain ballooning. Because a stent has a problem, the restenosis rate is very the simple ballooning and prevent the distal protection device. Sometimes, most of the time, there is some thrombus formation. So these are the issue in which in future this patient should be intervened. Otherwise, this is a progressive disease because there are vaccine waning of the inflammatory process occur. So in future coming time, the patient will become very symptomatic and may present with severe ischemia of brain, and there is some severe and stroke can occur.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, this is what I also felt, because these patients should have been intervened once the inflammatory parameters normalizes. And one other thing is in all the Takayasu cases, which because we had a largest series in CMC, and Dr. George Joseph is one of the premier cardiologists who is doing these interventions. In all these cases, we used to do the pulmonary angiogram because that is also necessary in all patients. Because whenever we make the classification of Takayasu arteriitis, you have to mention C minus, P minus, or C plus, P plus, or both C plus, P minus. Means you have to look for a pulmonary arteries also. And this patient should have been intervened once after the normalization of the inflammatory parameters, because he's quite symptomatic also. You said that patient was quite symptomatic he had symptoms, giddiness, and all those symptoms he had. And the lesions where it was, means a point was there when it could have been intervened, because it doesn't appear to be too diffuse. At one point there was a cutoff which could have been circumvented by the stent. So that is what I also felt. Any other comments, Dr. R.K. Agarwal, sir?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay. So it was good presentation by Dr. Kashyap, and thank you very much. However, I will want my cases to be presented as per the serial.
No, I think one more PG presentation is there. So we'll Dr. Sushil Kumar from IGIC. Thereafter, CD presentation is there.
Okay. All right.
So I'd like to invite, thank you, Dr. Prashant, for your wonderful presentation. I would like to invite Dr. Sushil from IGIC Patna to have his presentation. Is Dr. Sushil there? So Dr. Sushil, is he ready with his presentation?
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Sir, good afternoon. I am Dr. Sushil, doing DNP from IGIC Patna. Today I am going to share some interesting case on echo. Next slide. Next slide. So this slide is showing a parasternal long axis view. There is a large mass. Sir, video is not playing, sir. Video is not playing. Okay, sir.
See the images. We can see the images. Yes.
Okay, sir. Only I'm showing the image only, sir. So first slide. First slide. Okay, sir. This is a parasternal long axis view. In the next slide, I'm going to show a big mass that is the. In the next slide, there is a big mass which is appearing spongy and attached with a small pedicle to intra-atrial septum in LA, and it is moving to and fro across the mitral valve. The tricuspid valve is pathological and not closing even in the systole. In the next slide, the mass is not causing any significant obstruction in the antegrade flow, and it is not causing significant mitral regurgitation too. In the next slide, the tricuspid, there is severe tricuspid regurgitation due to pathological tricuspid valve. In the next slide, there is severe tricuspid regurgitation that is seen here. Next slide. It is showing that the severe tricuspid regurgitation is of low velocity. Next slide. So this is a case of left atrial myxoma. Second case. Next slide. This slide is showing a subcostal view in which there is multiple echogenic masses appearing in different sizes, which is attached with the wall of the right ventricle or intraventricular septum. In the next slide. Short axis at aorta, again showing the same multiple echogenic masses in the right ventricle. Next slide. Same masses in different sizes attached, more in the right ventricle, less appearing in the left ventricle. Next slide. Again, the same mass is in subcostal view in RB and LB. So this is a case of cardiac rhabdomyomas. Next slide. This slide is showing that this mass is not obstructing LVOT. Next slide. So this is a case of cardiac rhabdomyoma. So case 3. Next slide. This is a apical 4-chamber view, which is showing that there is large ostium primum ASD, large VSD, there is single atrioventricular wall, and there is a cleft mitral wall. There is a cleft in the left wall of the single atrioventricular wall. It is a characteristic of atrioventricular septal defect, that is a variant of AV canal defect. Next slide. Again, showing the same view in the next slide. This is showing that the single atrioventricular valve is regurgitating. Next slide. This video is trying to show that the pulmonary artery is arising from the left ventricle, and it is bifurcating, and aorta is arising from the right ventricle. That means that there is a discordance. Next slide. This is showing that the pulmonary artery is arising from the left ventricle, and there is turbulence in the antegrade flow. That means that there is pulmonary stenosis too. Next slide. And the gradient across the pulmonary valve is more than 100 millimeter Hg. So this is a case of, next slide. Next slide. This is again showing the pulmonary artery arising from the LV, and there is a turbulence in the antegrade flow, and it is bifurcating too. So this is a case of complete ABSD with DTGA with severe pulmonary stenosis. Next slide. Next slide. This is case 4. Next slide. This is showing parasternal long axis view, in which there is ventricular septal defect, and there is a RCC that is prolapsing to the septal defect. Next slide. On color Doppler, there is severe aortic regurgitation. The jet of the blood is flowing from the left ventricle to the right ventricle. Next slide. In this, it is not clearly visible, but in the next slide. In this slide, it is shown that in a short axis at aorta, there is a jet that is seen at 12 o'clock, and there is severe aortic regurgitation too. Next slide. For apical 5-chamber view showing turbulence of blood flowing from the left ventricle to right ventricle. Next slide. Showing severe LV dysfunction and dilated LV. So this is a case of doubly committed VSD with RCC prolapse with severe LV dysfunction. Next slide. So this is the last case. Next slide. Showing parasternal long axis view showing large perimembranous VSD with override. Next slide. On color Doppler, there is a bidirectional flow across the shunt. Next slide. On short axis at aorta, it appears there is a echo dropout at 10 o'clock, means perimembranous VSD, and at the level of pulmonary valve, there is no pulmonary leaflet. There is only dysplastic and thickened pulmonary annulus with very much dilated, hugely dilated pulmonary artery with branches. There is no RVOT stenosis, rather RVOT is in fact dilated. Next slide. Again showing that there is no pulmonary valve, there is only thickened and dysplastic pulmonary annulus. Next slide. On color Doppler across the pulmonary annulus, it is showing that there is severe pulmonary regurgitation as well as pulmonary stenosis, which will be showing the next slide on CW profile. Next slide. It is showing that there is severe pulmonary regurgitation as well as stenosis. So this is a case of TOF with absent pulmonary valve, a very rare presentation of very common cyanotic congenital heart disease. So TOF with absent pulmonary valve. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Susil, for your presentation. Excellent echo cases, especially the congenital cases. So this session is over, and Yeah, so I think Dr. Yuan Singh, can we let Dr. Yuan Singh to present his CD?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, so his, okay, now Dr. Susil is, okay. Dr. Yuan Singh, go on with your presentation.
Very good afternoon, Dr. Agarwal sir
Yeah.
and colleagues. It's very nice, and I am pleased to see you all. Although this meeting is not face to face, it's very soothing to see your faces after so long time. I'm very happy to see you all, sir. So today I am presenting a case of peripheral intervention.
Whether your slides are not visible.
Is it visible now?
Yeah, it's visible now.
Yeah, okay. So this is a closure of embolization, closure of lumbar artery pseudoaneurysm. So this is a story of a 27-year-old male. He has history of PCNR in October 2020 in some other hospital. He presented to me with large hematoma at the incision site in the lumbar region, left lumbar region, with a fever, high-grade fever. His lab finding showed the marked leukocytosis and had severe anemia. The patient was stabilized with IV antibiotics, and he was given blood transfusion several units. And after 2 to 3 days of initial admission, he was stabilized, and some initial investigations were also done. He had an ultrasound, old ultrasound. It showed there was a heterogeneous lesion measuring 6.7 to 5.5 centimeter, noted in the proximal part of the renal artery, left renal artery, and there was a large clot. The CT showed there was a large clot with a pseudoaneurysm just close to the left kidney. So I have I have handled the several cases of the post PCNR hematuria, and most of them had intrarenal pseudoaneurysm that I clothed with the several particles like PBA particles, some glue, and so this case was very peculiar to me, as there was huge bleeding from the drainage site area, incision site area in the left lumbar region. There was bleeding. The bleeding was so severe that had required the several units of blood transfusion, and there was large clot. I can show you. This was a clot. This was a large clot beneath this site, incision site. So with that finding of the CT and ultrasonography, I chose to do a angiography, renal angiography. I did the left renal angiography, and you can see here, I am playing it repeatedly. Renal arteries appear normals. There is no leakage of dye from the renal arterioles. In fact, you can see an artery which is arising very close to the left renal artery, that's arising from the aorta, and you can see in the lateral part of this video, you can see there is a spillage of the dye. Here is the smoky pattern. Can you see? Can you see the spilling of the dye from an artery which is very close to the left renal artery?
Yes. We can see it here.
So luckily I find the cause of this bleeding. So with the guiding 5 French catheter, I got deep into this artery, and you can see here there is large hematoma, large sac here. So I took a Nestor coil, which was compatible with the 3-5 systems, and this was 3 mm coil, Nestor coil. I just injected this and pushed the coil deep So although there was some flow after the initial implantation of this coil, there was closure, absolute closure after few minutes, about 5 to 10. I waited for 5 to 10 minutes and there was no flow. So the problem was subsided and patient was discharged home. He was quite okay for 3 to 4 months, but he again came to me in the month of May 2021. So urologist opinion was taken. He advised for the CT angiography, and CT angiography again showed this type of large clot is just close to the artery. This time he himself opened it, and whatever, I don't know what he did, but the problem recurred again after 5 to 10 days. So this time the patient was so loyal to me, he came to me and I did the conventional angiography, and you can see here, that's what recanalization of this artery, lumbar artery. This is actually a lumbar artery, I will show you. So that was recanalization in 4 months. How the dye is passing without any. So actually the coil, this coil causes occlusion of these blood vessels, not by the, but just mere the physical occlusion, but it creates an environment that causes fiber to occlude the vessel permanently. But this failed to do in this case. So again I intervened. I took this time with a guiding and micro catheter. This is a BMW wire, passed through the vessel and beyond the coil. So again, I put a 3 mm coil. Actually, the size of the coil are larger, so this the coil has get straightened within the vessels. And I took another coil and push this just distal to the proximal. This is the first coil, and you can see here this is second coil, and this one is the previous coil. So came with the same problem. This time the bleeding was not much significant, but there was some leakage of just oozing of some fresh blood, but falling hemoglobin. This is the angiography of July here, just last month, just this month, first week, and this time I did another coil and I used the PVA particle also. So there was immediate closure of. This is the final picture. You can see here. So lumbar artery injury generally occurs following the lumbar disc surgery and the renal surgery, kidney biopsy, and sometimes particularly in both patients who present with the hemodynamic stability and shocks. Lumbar artery are usually the pure artery which arises from the dorsal aspect of the aorta. After the arising from the aorta, the lumbar artery encircles the aorta and gives supply to the Schwartz muscle and radicular branches, radicular medullary branches, which parallel to the spinal nerve root and divides into the anterior and posterior spinal artery. Then they divide into anterior posterior branches and they supply the spinal cord and the muscle of the back and skin of the back.
Okay.
This
So,
is actually the posterior intercostal arteries and lumbar arteries give us the segmental blood supply. We need to remember that this spinal radicular spinal branches, they arise from the medial part of the lumbar arteries. So while these other precautions must be taken while embolizing these patients, the proximal placement of the coil and migration of the embolic materials like the PVA particle, gel forms can occur into the radicular medullary branches, which can result in the spinal infarction. So care must be taken while embolizing. To prevent the proximal leakage of the embolized blood, you can inflate the balloon just distal to the branch of interest which we want to protect it. So these are the embolic materials. The temporary are the gel form, collagen, and foam being the permanent are the particles like PVA, embospheres. Coils, we have the different coil of type of coils, pushable, injectable, detachable coils. We have also employed plugs and the glue. So I realized that in first or second phase, I have to use PVA particle along with the this coil to cause the permanent because this lumbar artery arises directly from the aorta, so pressure is definitely higher. So might have opened up this artery.
Upender, finish quickly.
Okay, sir, just finish. This you can see the scar mark along with the cord. This is the present scar. Thank you.
But the fact that this got recanalized after 4 months, that basically means that the coil was not adequate size, or what happened?
Might be, sir, because it appears that fully occluded the physically, and the fact we can show that. And I pushed with this hard wire, thick pipe wire to the distal part as much as it can go.
Okay.
But
Okay.
sometimes it can recanalize this.
So thank you very much. Very nice presentation. Anybody else wants to say anything about it, the presentation?
Yeah, it was nicely done. And can we have next?
Yeah, Vineet, you show your slides and finish quickly.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. And I'm going to see one case. It's really interesting. DJ in pulmonary artery. P stands for pulmonary artery. Here, DJ will going to be unlocked next slides. This is a story of a 49-year-old gentleman having the respiratory tract infections. He went to some hospital, private hospital, and antibiotics were given, but there was no relief of symptom. So physician asked for X-ray, and after seeing that X-ray, that physician become frightened and asked to go for some higher center. Basically, there one old history was there, percutaneous nephrolithotomy for a large renal stone for 2 years back, and following which a double G stent was inserted to ensure the drainage of urine from the kidney into the bladder. And this is a usual DJ stent they are implanting after removing the stent. We went for a review to another hospital after 2 weeks for DJ stent removal. Abdominal X-ray they have seen, and they saw DJ stent was missing from there, and they told no stent was seen, and hence that patient sent back with assurance that there is no need for a stent removal. And after that, patient went home and went back for the work, and he was totally asymptomatic after that. And this X-ray revealed the story something else. That this X-ray is showing that DJ stent have reached up to here. That echo, here we can see it's seen that white matter here. It's somewhere in the main pulmonary artery. And we have done the CT angiography that also reveal the same things. This is a 3D reconstruction of CT angiography. After that, we have searched for some journal. We got some case report of migration of DJ stent into the IBC and right atriums, and some other extremely rare complication case report I have seen their urethral pictal stent placements that also into the RA. After that, he was not willing for surgery, so we have decided to remove it percutaneously and with explaining all the risk. 7 French femoral venous seat we've inserted in double length thermo wire with the help of 6 French JR catheter we have taken. And this was the DJ stent. We've attempted several times. Actually, we are thinking we are going to succeed in this 2D view, but after snaring, even in this view, it was looking at, we already catch it, but after pulling down, it's how we have not actually bowled. After several unsuccessful attempt, we able to catch it, and under fluoroscopic guidance, slowly and gradually, with gentle hand, we try to pull it, and by the God grace, it came also without much difficulty. But to the IVC, it stuck at the femoral seat because our seat was 7 French only. So we have removed that femoral seat and removed the whole thing in mass. And this was the size of DJ stent. And we have to say, thanks to this in-snare also, without help of this in-snare, it was very difficult to catch that. After the patient, that uneventful post-procedure period was there. He was discharged, and uneventful review event is also there. So we can say, we can conclude pulmonary artery migration is an extremely rare complications of urethral DJ stent placements. Multiple treatment options can be used for this situation, such as percutaneous removal by snare catheter when possible, and second one, open surgery. And this one, percutaneous removal of the migrated stent under fluoroscopic guidance by snare catheter from the femoral access is a safe and effective treatment if we can do it judiciously or with most care. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Vineet, for your wonderful presentation. What was the PA pressure of that patient?
No, sir, at that time it was almost normal, sir.
PA pressure, because pulmonary artery looked slightly dilated, but it might be. So anyway, very nice presentation. Any comments, R.K. Agarwal sir, Ajay Sinha sir, Dr. Vipin?
I have one question. How did it migrate from the artery in the ureter into the pulmonary vein, whatever? How did it go in that?
Somehow it definitely negotiated into the renal vein or somewhere, sir, so that it have to come into the vascular system by any way, either during implantation time or something that have missed some problem, because it's not the first case. I search, I got 2 more cases earlier, it is reported, sir. So probably there was some mistake during implantation, or somehow it have to manage into the venous system, probably renal vein that is near about. And after that, slowly it migrated into the IVC from the RA to the RV to the pulmonary artery.
The event was long time back. So initially
Yes, sir,
bleeding and all. Maybe patient had bleeding at that time from ureter somewhere. Somehow it went into vein, and then, but later on now no bleeding. So
during the implantation, some injury happened in the vascular tree.
No, sir. Initially, during stone removal and all those things, there is usually some bleeding that might be ignored by that point, probably.
But anyway, it was a wonderful presentation.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful presentation. Great job done.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, next.
Thank you, Dr. Vineet. Next, Dr. Samshad. I would like to invite Dr. Samshad to give his CD presentation.
Good morning, everyone. and thanks for giving me this opportunity to present myself in front of such a stalwarts of cardiology in Patna. Today, I will be discussing about those procedures which are beyond coronaries, which we perform in our cath lab. I think my screen is visible to everyone.
Yes, yes, yes.
I have a bunch of 4 cases. This is the first case where we used a covered stent. A 24-year-old male, he presented with a below knee injury of left lower limb with a proceeding fall in hemoglobin along with persistent swelling of the foot. He was sent to us to rule out any vascular injury. So he was taken in the cath lab and right femoral access was taken with a GR guide catheter was crossed to the left side and then contrast injection was taken. After the contrast injection, we found that there was a rupture of the posterior tibial artery, the branch of the popliteal artery, with significant leakage of the contrast. This might have contributed to fallen hemoglobin as well as a progressive swelling of the feet. So further on, we proceeded to manage this. So we wired the artery with a whisper wire, and after wiring a whisper wire, we placed 2 overlapping graft master stent, one with 2.8 into 19 mm and second 3.5 into 19 mm, because these were the 2 sizes which we were having in our cath lab at that time. And after placement of these 2 stents and post dilatation with a second stent balloon, this was the result which we found. No significant leakage of the contrast after post-procedural injection, and good distal flow was noted in that foot. And finally, when the patient came to us on follow-up after 1 week, we found that his swelling in the limb has gradually disappeared with a significant rise in his hemoglobin after blood transfusion. Now, this is a second case where we used a vascular plug. A 60-year-old male, he was diagnosed with large renal cell carcinoma for which nephrectomy was planned. But the surgeons were a bit worried due to large size of the tumor and it was highly vascular. So they asked for help through cardiology side, what help we could provide. So the patient was taken in the cath lab, a renal angiogram was done, and he was planned for renal artery closure with a vascular plug with adequate sizing. This is his renal angiogram. We can see the so much high vascularity of his kidney affected with carcinoma. And after this, we plan to close this renal artery with a vascular plug. Initially, we tried to go through femoral access, but the device delivery was not quite possible due to tortuosity, 2 different bends of the renal artery at the site of origin and at the mid part. So further, we plan to get the access through right radial artery, and then we pass the hooked renal artery with GR catheter, and then we delivered the device because this time the delivery of the device was quite easier. So we delivered a 8 mm Sera vascular plug, and this is the final result which we can see that there is complete occlusion of the renal artery, so further decreasing the vascularity. Now, the main catch point of this case is that it is not that after we close the renal artery and then we can let the patient go off home. This has to be operated as early as possible because the patient will have renal infarction, he will have severe pain after that. And also he can fall out into sepsis and abscess formation due to complete occlusion of the renal artery. This is a third case where we use vascular coils. We had a 30-year-old male who presented with persistent hematuria post-PCNL. His renal angiogram was done. This is the patient. His renal angiogram was done, right renal angiogram done, and it was found that there was a distal vascular perforation of the renal artery. There was branch perforation. So we finally wired it with a coronary wire and passed on a 4 French GR catheter that we followed mother and child catheter technique, which we usually follow in coronary arteries. And after selective hooking of that branch vessel, this is the final injection which showed significant dye leakage after contrast injection. So finally, what we did, we just put a vascular coil, 3 mm vascular coil in that vessel to occlude it proximally, because we do not need to occlude vessel so proximally such that other branch vessels get affected. So this was the delivery of the vascular coil through that 4-French JR catheter. And post-delivery, the selective injection showed that there was no significant blood flow through that branch vessel, and obviously that bleeding was sealed off. And this is the final injection. Final injection has to be taken from the major renal artery to rule out any other injury which we could have done during that vascular coil delivery. Now, this is the fourth case. In this case, we use PVA particles. We had a 25-year-old boy who was diagnosed with pulmonary tuberculosis. He had recurrent hemoptysis, for which he had underwent blood transfusion twice, and he was admitted twice for blood transfusion in the hospital. And we were surprised that his hemoglobin fell to 4 to 5 grams, for which 4 units of blood were transfused. So after confirmation of the site of bleed from bronchoscopy and CT thorax, he was taken for vascular embolization. We were suggested that there has been bleeding from the right side and preferably from the upper bronchial artery. So we selectively cannulated upper bronchial artery with a JR catheter, and we found that in the first slide we can see a flame-shaped appearance. This is at my pointer, we can see a flame-shaped appearance. This is the site of blood loss. But we were surprised that so small amount of blood leakage is there, how his hemoglobin can drop. It may have occurred that their partial closure would have occurred. So finally, we have proceeded to close this branch vessel of the right upper bronchial artery. So we wired it with a coronary wire, and then we passed on a microcatheter over coronary wire. And after passing on microcatheter from coronary wire, we selectively embolized that branch vessel by PVA 300 particles. Now, this is the final injection after embolization with PVA 3 particles with the JR catheter along with the microcatheter. We found that there was complete occlusion of that branch vessel. We can see it here. And this is the final shot. So that flame-shaped area which was observed in the first shot, it is not visible in the final shot. So finally, by this, his blockage, his bleeding site was treated. So by this presentation, I want to conclude that we have multiple options for treating this vascular injuries in our cath lab. These are the 4 different cases where we, in first case, we used a graft stent. In the second case, we used a vascular plug. In third case, we used a vascular coil. And in final case, we used PVA particles. Yeah, and another option is available, that is gel foam. Usually the problem with gel foam is that recanalization with the time occurs usually when we use gel foam. So thank you for a nice hearing of this case.
Thank you, Dr. Samsad, for your excellent presentation using all modalities for distal closure. So any comments from anyone?
Samsad has done a great job. What I would say is it's a kind of wisdom, best wisdom to be used for different type of cases. That's what Samsad has done. So congratulations to you.
Yeah, actually, sir, this is the support of our great interventionist, Dr. Vipin Kumar,
I know
with the help of whom it has been performed.
Yeah.
And actually the decision making and the diagnosis is very important.
Yeah,
for these type of cases.
True.
Usually it is a case of intervention radiology, but that thing we are lacking in Bihar. So we have to do these cases.
Correct.
Yeah, great. Congratulations to you and Dr. Samsad and Dr. Vipin. So now I would like to invite Dr. Rajiv Krishna for his CD presentation. Rajiv, over to you.
Okay, so I will be presenting 2 structural heart disease cases. This is a 9-year-old boy who presented with shortness of breath. On echocardiogram, there was bicuspid aortic valve with severe aortic stenosis. So we plan to do aortic valve balloon dilatation. We took a GIR catheter and passed a thermo wire through this GIR catheter. Oh, sorry, this. So we passed a thermo wire through this GIR catheter from aorta to and then balloon dilatation was tried. The balloon slipped because of a high force of RV. The balloon could not hold. So we already had TPI in place, and so we went for a high rate pacing to suppress the high RV force. And with this high rate pacing, then we can go for this balloon dilatation. So this was a 16 into 50 mm balloon, 1:1 size with aortic annulus diameter. And dilatation was done with RV pacing at 180 rate, fast RV pacing, so that the balloon does not get discarded due to the high RV force. This is another case, a female patient, 17-year-old female patient, presented with sudden onset severe chest pain and shortness of breath on exertion for few days. So on echocardiogram, this was ruptured sinus of Valsalva aneurysm from our right coronary sinus to RV. And you can see we took the shot from pigtail to exactly localize the position, and sizing was done. And then a wire was crossed through this aortic side to the RV, and then this, you can see the wire from the aortic side to cross to the RV, then pulmonary artery, and then this was snared. The wire from this aortic side was snared. We went from the venous side, took the snare from RA to RV, and then snared this wire and pulled this wire with the help of snare. So here you can see the wire was pulled into the IVC. So first the wire, thermo wire, was crossed from aortic side to the RV. Then from venous side we went and caught the end tip of the wire and then pulled it out into the IVC. Here you can see the loop, the wire from the RV to IVC, and then a sheath was passed, GIR catheter was passed, and the wire was brought into the IVC, and then the wire was changed with the stiff wire, that is Amplatzer stiff wire. So we took the Amplatzer stiff wire. So this is the Amplatzer stiff wire from the aortic side into the IVC, and then we are trying to snare this stiff wire into the IVC side to take it out from the IVC. So snare is being tried, and with help of a snare we caught the wire tip and pulled it out. So complete loop was formed through the exchange length wire, and then from this IVC side, from IVC to the RA, going this on the Amplatzer stiff wire, we passed the delivery sheath from the IVC side to the aortic side. So delivery sheath was passed into the aorta from the IVC side, and this is the delivery sheath. To this delivery sheath, the device was passed. This is a 24 by 22 mm Amplatzer, LifeTech ductal occluder device. 24 into 22 LifeTech ductal occluder device was placed, and a shot was taken by pigtail when this upper end was inflated. Upper end, the sheath was pulled back and upper end get excluded. Then a shoot was taken by the pigtail to confirm the position of this ductal occluder device. So here proper positioning was done First proper positioning was done. Half of the device was out from the delivery seat, and then a shoot was taken with the pigtail. Here you can see the positioning of the upper end of this ductal occluder device. Then pulling of the device was done. Push was done to see if whether the device is at the proper positioning or not, and then gradually the device was released. So here you can see the positioning of the device at the proper part from the ruptured sinus of Valsalva side towards the RV side, and then gradually the device was released. After checking the proper positioning, we are gradually releasing the device. When the position was confirmed, the leak was seen. Here you can see gradually the device is being released. So this is after the release of device. The device took its shape from the rupture sinus of Valsalva side from the aorta to the RV side, and then this is the device after delivery. And after 10 minutes of device delivery, we took a shot by the pigtail to confirm the position and how is the leak. And here you can see minimal leak is still there, but the leak that was present beforehand has sealed. Mild leak is still present, and we kept the patient on aspirin for 6 months, and patient was doing well. So we have done a few cases of rupture sinus of Valsalva, which is usually done by surgical closure, but we have done 4 to 5 cases of RSOV till date, and all patients do well in the long term. They are in our follow-up.
Yeah, great presentation, Dr. Rajiv. And
I would like to thank Dr. R.D. Yadav, sir, who was present during the case, and he guided us to do the case.
Okay, greatly done. Means RSOV, it has always to be, you have to go from arterial side, and then you have to snare it from the venous side, and you have to deploy from the venous side. It was nicely done, and great case, Rajiv. And can we now have any comments from anyone?
And we have done at least 4 or 5 cases till date, and all are doing well.
Yeah, it's a very safe and effective method of closing RSOV. And now most of the places where after TE confirmation that the device will not slip, then in all such cases, this should be attempted. Any comments from B.V. Bharati, sir, Dr.
But I would like to say only to be done in the presence of surgical team, because it can immobilize during deployment. So we have to be careful, and only in presence of surgical team we should go for these cases.
Yes,
Actually,
yes, very true.
Actually,
how you measure the size of device? How can you?
We measure with by doing a transesophageal echocardiography, and again at the lab table we take a shoot from pigtail, but it is best to do by TE.
Right.
Actually, the important issue with this device, RSOV closure, is the congenital anomaly and causes the weakness. Second important issue, it is many of times is associated with infective endocarditis. So these 2 things very important, but long-term studies are not very good, because there is some other places the weakness occur and can cause rupture, second rupture of sinus Valsalva. So this is one of the aspects we should always consider when doing the RSOV, because the surgical closure is a best method of doing this. But when patient denied, then go for this device.
No, I will disagree here. There are a series of data regarding surgical this device closure, and patients do good on device closure also. Yeah, first choice is surgical closure because the defects are long and there is AR, associated AR. So in these cases we should go for surgical closure, but I don't think we should not do this device closure for RSOV. We can go for RSOV device closure, and there are long-term data available Many series of work has been done, and it is also a good method to go to close RSV.
And second, one of there are many a times it's associated with VSD. So always look for the
many times
VSD and
then
be
we
careful.
have-
So everything should be carefully screened before doing this thing. It is easy to do with device closure, not a very
before doing
challenging.
closure, we should take a RV angiogram shoot to rule out this VSD. This is very correctly pointed out by Dr. Bharti sir.
Very many of times the VSD is closed with this rupture of sinus valve due to prolapse. So sometimes you can miss the echo.
Yeah, this thing too should be considered.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Rajiv. Can I invite Dr. Vikas Singh is there? Dr. Vikas?
Yes, sir. I'm here, sir.
Yeah, I would like to invite Dr. Vikas Singh for his CD presentation. Over to you, Vikas.
So a very good evening, everyone. And after those variety of wonderful non-coronary interventions, I'll be taking you back to the coronary part. So in ACS, whenever we encounter a patient, the target is to just open up the artery, establish the flow, and do not get into unnecessary interventions or complicated procedures. But there are times when you are really stuck up and you have to go for some complicated procedures which you have not planned. So I'll be taking you through a mini crush bifurcation stenting in the setting of acute coronary syndrome, which we recently did. So he was a 50-year-old male, a diabetic. He had class 2 effort angina for last 1 year, severe chest pain with sweating a day prior to presentation. He was admitted somewhere else, diagnosed as acute anterior wall MI, thrombolized with tenecteplase. Early in the window period of only 2 hours. After initial pain and ST settlement, he started having episodes of rest pain again. And that was when he was referred to us. Echo showed hypokinesia of hereditary, but the thickness was absolutely preserved, ejection fraction of around 45%. So the initial diagnostic shoot, this was where we were. Mid-LAD, tight lesion, and a big diagonal, the major diagonal coming up from the same region, also showing a very tight lesion. So we planned for, in fact, a bifurcation stenting, because in a couple of shoots, in fact, during diagnostic procedure also, the flow in the diagonals was getting compromised to TIMI1 and TIMI2. So we thought it would be unfair to leave the diagonal and let's try going ahead with a bifurcation stenting in place. So we got through a 7 French radial access, which was fortunately possible in this case. JL 3.5, 7 French guiding catheter. LED was easily wired with BMW, but diagonal wiring was really difficult. If you see the lesion, the diagonal entry, it was really tight and we were facing a lot of trouble going across. So we decided to put in a small balloon in LED just distal to the diagonal and inflated it there, which helped us to cross the wire in diagonal. Then we went through the usual 2.5 into 12 balloon in diagonal. Thereafter, we put in another balloon in LED. We decided to go for a dilatation of both the arteries simultaneously. Thereafter, 2.75 into 18 drug-eluting stent was deployed in diagonal with some part extending into the LED, which we do in a mini crush. And we had a NC balloon 3 into 15 positioned across the diagonal during the deployment. After stent deployment, the diagonal wire was removed and the NC balloon was inflated to crush the diagonal stent which was there in the LED. A long 3.5 into 34 DES was then placed in LED covering the lesion and it was then deployed. So this is how, this is where we got into. Again, rewiring into the diagonal was again difficult, but we managed it somehow. And after proximal optimization, we went for final kissing ballooning. And this was where we ended our case into. So this is how things appear from inside when we are stenting the diagonal and the LED in a mini crush technique. I would like to highlight some points after having that discussion on the case. we actually searched for literature to see how common it is and how difficult and about the post-procedural outcomes of these cases. So there was an original article in 2018 regarding bifurcation culprit lesions in ST elevation MI, procedural success and 5-year outcomes compared with non-bifurcation lesions. And they said that baseline characteristics, they do not differ much between the groups which show bifurcation and non-bifurcation lesions. But compared with the non-bifurcation group, procedures are technically more complex, which we know. There is longer procedural time, which is one unfavorable thing to have in a case of ACS. Then the contrast uses also goes up. Main branch angiographic success was similar whether we were dealing with non-bifurcation lesions or bifurcation lesion. However, 30-day all-cause mortality was similar between the two groups. So just to highlight that probably chasing the diagonals or probably chasing a side branch in each and every case is not a good idea. But here we had a large side branch which had a significant stenosis, and we had to do that. There was also an editorial on bifurcation lesions causing an STEMI. Are they a different animal? And there were certain studies which have been done, and they show that long-term outcomes, 5-year data of patients with bifurcation lesions causing STEMI is similar to that of those with non-bifurcated lesion. And last, there was a COBIS 2 registry. And just look at the results. The median length of follow-up was 38 months. Post-procedural side branch diameter stenosis differed significantly, yes. But after the performance of weighted methods, the rate of MACE was significantly higher in the 2-stent group. So wherever possible, we have to try to keep it simple in a provisional stenting technique that we usually do. But again, as I said, that this is not always feasible. They also concluded with the last line, however, this result should be interpreted with caution because this study does not reflect current practice. Whatever data is available from the prior studies, the data is now very much changed because of better stents, the better strut designs, and the procedural success rates are also better compared to the previous times. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vikas, for your excellent presentation. And yes, I would also like to comment that with the availability of newer stents, so I think bifurcation stenting is going to have a better result in future data that we'll have. Any comments from Dr. B.V. Bharti, sir, or anyone, Dr. Vipin, sir, Dr. Samsad?
Actually, this case was very nicely done by Vikas, very good case. And in acute coronary syndrome, definitely there is a very big issue like a contrast issue, blood pressure issue, and how much patient is sick. These are the very important aspects when you do primary angioplasty, thrombus containing lesion. So it is always be careful in doing a primary angioplasty and patient is unstable. Then it is very difficult to do this type of thing. Go as fast with minimum contrast. Keep flowing the side branch and extend the main artery. This is a main aim in doing primary angioplasty. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Which wire
So-
you used for Vikas?
Yes.
Which wire you used for diagonal wiring earlier, which was difficult to do?
Vikas, which wire you used it for the side branch?
Sir?
Which wire you used in side branch?
Sir, we managed with a BMW, but we had tried all wires before that. We tried with a Whisper, we tried with a Fielder also, but we lastly managed with a BMW only after inflating the balloon.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Vikas. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Shravan Kumar to give his CD presentation. Dr. Shravan is there?
Dr. Shravan, I think, is not there.
Okay, then I would like to invite Dr. Vipin Kumar to give his CD presentation. Over to you, Dr. Vipin.
So good evening, everybody. I will show one case of proximal common iliac aneurysm, which was endovascularly excluded. So she was 65-year-old female and presented with back pain and lower abdominal pain. And ultrasound showed large vascular swelling and hematoma in right iliac fossa. And this was the CT angiogram. You can see the extent of the hematoma. And aorta was 9 millimeter to 8 millimeter. You can see in the right side, and the hematoma and the thrombus, extent of thrombus. And it was 11 centimeter into about 6 to 7 centimeter. And later, after that, it was totally occluded. Common iliac artery was occluded, and then reformation was seen before branching to internal iliac artery. So a longitudinal extent of the aneurysm. And here you can see the 3D picture of proximal common iliac artery aneurysm. So aneurysm was starting from the origin of common iliac artery. After aneurysm, common iliac artery was totally occluded, and then there was reformation of common iliac artery before internal iliac artery branching, and this was obviously from collaterals. So this was the angiogram. Here the extent is seen less because of the thrombus around the iliac artery aneurysm. But here you can see clearly that there was a reformation of the common iliac artery. So, and this was to see the contralateral side common iliac. So what was done in this case, we have taken a pigtail through radial side to check angio, and one stent graft was taken 16 into 16 into 100 by LifeTech. And what we have done is contralateral side, we have taken a ioto. We have planned for a ioto uni iliac stenting. In this case, here the thing was that because the ipsilateral side, it was already occluded. So from one side, from lower side, common iliac arteries or aneurysm is already excluded because of occlusion. So I have to exclude it from the aorta only. So it was a little easier. So this was a ioto uni iliac stent graft placement, and the aneurysm was completely excluded, and the other side, ipsilateral side, common iliac reformation is seen. And the plan was, if patient have ischemic symptoms later on, then we can send her for surgery for aortofemoral graft. And it was post dilated with this. So aneurysm was completely excluded with a good reformation of ipsilateral vessel. So this was the post CT angiogram. Aneurysm was completely occluded and thrombosed. So the huge aneurysm, and this was the final result, 3D picture. So what things we consider in common iliac artery aneurysm exclusions? So we have to see margin after aortic bifurcation, whether the aorta is involved or not, what is the distal, where is the distal landing site. We have to see, most important thing is internal iliac artery origin, distal CFA flow, and tortuosity of iliac vessels. And we have multiple grafts comes, abdominal aortic artery graft, which bifurcates, and then aorto uni iliac graft and iliac extension grafts comes, which we can use in different patients. And just so another example of a similar case. In this case, here you can see the proximal common iliac artery, this aneurysm and involvement of internal iliac artery. So internal iliac artery is from the aneurysm itself. So whenever we are excluding iliac artery aneurysms, we have to exclude the internal iliac artery also, to completely exclude, because otherwise if the internal iliac is arising from aneurysm, then it will have the aneurysm will not be excluded, and it will have a flow from the opposite side from collaterals. So it always have a risk of rupture and all. So in this case, what we have done from the opposite side, first close the internal iliac artery through vascular plug, and then simply from ipsilateral side, you put a stent graft. and so this was the final result. So the previous case, what we have done, because it was already occluded, so if you do other way around, like you reopen the common iliac artery, first recanalize, then you have to put a bifurcation aortic graft stenting, and then iliac extension. This is a cumbersome, and the vessel is already occluded, and the common femoral artery reformation is seen with the collaterals. So simplest way to do it was aortouniiliac graft stenting from the opposite side, and which was done in the earlier case, which was done in this case. So in this I have shown 2 cases of common iliac artery aneurysm. Okay, thank you. If any questions, then you can.
As always, wonderful, nicely done, and wonderful presentation, Dr. Vipin. Any comments from
Not here.
anyone?
Yeah.
Any comments from anyone? So thank you, Dr. Vipin. Now I would like to conclude this session. I would like to thank all CD presenters and chairpersons for their valuable inputs. And I'd like to conclude this session. Bye to everyone.